Hey everyone, it's Sky from Arthritis to Athlete here, and if you're anything like me, then the culture that you were raised in probably dictated a lot of what you perceive as healthy or not. And a lot of the time, or at the very least in my case, this can end up causing a lot of misconceptions about health, nutrition, and fitness. That's why today we're talking about the 3 biggest health and fitness myths that most people are taught growing up. Cue that intro. The thing. I grew up thinking I was eating a very healthy diet, and from a cultural perspective, I was, but I was still consuming lots of foods that I had no idea that were harming me down the line. And if you saw my video a few weeks back about why fitness advice is stupid, then you know that the fitness industry only compounded this problem. But once I was knee deep in crippling spinal arthritis, I had to put my preconceptions behind me and look at my health with a fresh set of eyes. I can talk more about those stories later, but for right now, it's time for myth number 1, and that is that protein is the most important thing for building muscle and strength. Now, I know I'm no bodybuilder, I'm just not about that, it's really not my goal. But just because somebody looks good or has a lot of muscle or is really strong, that doesn't necessarily make their advice good. And same vice versa.
Yo dude, this guy at the gym was telling me that dish soap is the best pre-workout.
Why would you ever believe something like that?
You know, I usually wouldn't, but this guy was just totally swole!
Now, it makes sense why people would believe this. Muscles are made primarily of protein, and thus protein must be the most important thing when it comes to their growth, right? But in fact, the most important thing for building muscle or getting stronger is actually lifting weights. I know, anticlimactic, right? But the real misconception here isn't that protein isn't important, it's more so just how it's overemphasized to the point of craziness. When it comes to post-workout nutrition, the optimal post-workout carb to protein ratio is actually in the ballpark of 3-to-1 to 4-to-1. This means you should actually be consuming more carbohydrates than you do protein. Most people do it the other way around, but science says otherwise. Now there's a couple reasons for this, but the one I'll really focus on here is stored glycogen. When you consume carbohydrates, your body turns them into glycogen, which is then stored in your muscles and liver. You can actually store about 500 grams worth of carbohydrates in the form of glycogen in your body. That translates to about 2,000 calories. Keeping your glycogen stores up is going to give you way more energy so you can push harder and longer in your next session. And like most people already know, being able to push harder for longer is going to optimize growth. So all these guys just downing huge protein shakes at the gym aren't really doing themselves as much good as they might think they are. 1, you don't even need that much protein. 2, you're not getting as much carbohydrates to keep your performance at optimal levels. And 3, most protein shakes are actually dairy-based and super terrible for you. Just a big bowl of rice and beans might be one of the easiest, cheapest, and healthiest ways to optimize your muscle growth. And if you're gonna focus on anything, focus on getting enough calories. As long as you're doing that, it's gonna be really hard for you to not get enough protein. And last thing here, don't be conned into thinking that all calories are equal. That might be true when it comes to building muscle, but it's definitely not true when concerning your overall health. For example, chocolate milk actually has this optimal macro ratio of 4-to-1. So the dairy industry heard this, and they started marketing it as the ideal post-workout drink. You can't make this stuff up, man.
Okay team, chocolate soy milk is now outselling our product in 50% of the markets across the country. How do we stop this? Come on guys, think! Our paycheck is at stake here! Hey, I got an idea! How about we market to a bunch of insecure men about how chocolate-flavored cow lactation helps build strong muscles? Huh, that's a great idea! Now, how do we do that?
Well, boss, according to my calculations, our cow lactation has the perfect amount of carbs to protein to build strong muscles. It's perfect!
That's genius! I knew I could count on you guys!
Boss, what about all the estrogen, saturated fat, and cholesterol in our product?
Americans are ignorant. They'll soon forget about that. Alright, next up we have myth number 2, and that's this idea of, oh, everything in moderation, right? So this myth might sound appealing, but there are several problems with it. First off, let's be honest, nobody actually knows what moderation is. We just use that as an excuse to continue doing things we know aren't good for us. I mean, after all, wouldn't it make more sense to try and maximize what's good and minimize what's bad? Also, whatever we consider moderation changes wildly based on how we feel and how hungry we are. And because of that, moderation tends to become, kind of like whatever we want it to be.
Hey
Hey, Aunt Patty, I thought you said you was gonna stop smoking.
Oh, sweetie, everything in moderation. Oh my gosh!
Aunt Patty, are you alright?
I think I'm having a heart attack.
Oh my gosh, what do I do?
Now, I know of some studies done on moderation, but unfortunately, I don't have access to them, so I can't actually read them. So instead, to interpret and explain some of these studies, here's Dr. Pam Popper. Check this out, this is really fascinating.
But the second experiment was even more interesting. It involved 294 men and women who were shown a picture of fruit-shaped gummy candies and then asked how much they liked them. The researchers reported that the more people said they liked the candies, the more pieces they said could be included in a moderate serving. The third experiment involved participants being asked about the definition of moderation for a whole variety of consumables, which included soft drinks, alcoholic drinks, ice cream, and fast food. The more often people reported eating the particular item, the more likely they were to report that their consumption of the items was within moderation. So in other words, the definition of the term moderation was not objective. Instead, people defined moderation as the amount they wanted to eat of a food they particularly liked.
Thanks, Pam. Also, this kind of advice is really good for government and agricultural organizations that want to profit off of your bad decisions. Government organizations tend to stray away from saying that there are good and bad dietary patterns. So if they can just tell you everything in moderation, then that keeps food companies and their sponsors profiting and very, very happy. Whew, I know this is getting a little controversial, but hey, somebody had to say it, right? Okay, moving on to our third and last myth, that's about how carbs spike our insulin and thus make us fat. Now this is one that I heard a lot in high school, from anybody from sports coaches to gym bros, you name it. But I look back on this information now and think, dang man, all that was doing was hurting me and leading me down a very bad path. It was information like this that was causing me to cut back on super healthy foods like fruits, sweet potatoes, and beans, simply because they had carbs in them. Oh, scary. All the while, I continued to slowly put on weight, despite trying to exercise and keep my calories low. And dumb old me is like, oh, it's gotta be the carbs, even though I'm eating like no carbs. And this misconception is so widespread that I'm sure a lot of insecure high schoolers are growing up with this idea just like I did. And with things like the ketogenic diet trending, it's only making things worse. You can get results on these types of protocols, no doubt, but the long-term health and environmental risks are worrying to say the least. And come on guys, you can't let yourself be conned into thinking that all carbs turn into sugar and thus are equal. We have to make a distinction between whole carbs and refined carbs. We can't just let fit-looking people tell us that all carbs are the same and will make you fat, because that's exactly the opposite of what the research says. For example, check out this study in which they massively overfed men with carbohydrates and found that a very small percentage of it was actually turned to fat. In order to start turning carbs to fat in your body, your glycogen stores have to be filled up with about 500 grams worth of carbohydrates. That's about like 2,000 calories of just carbs. And even then, your body is pretty inefficient at doing that. It actually has to use energy to turn the carbohydrates into fat. Long story short, fruit and potatoes, they're not the problem. And we also have amazing studies like this, the Broad study. Here they had participants eat unlimited amounts of whole plant foods and didn't even mandate exercising. What they found was the greatest sustained weight loss at 6 and 12 months than any other study of its kind. Unlimited amounts of whole carb-rich foods without exercise, and they kept the weight off without really even trying. And just another anecdote here, whenever I switched to a whole food plant-based diet rich in whole food carbohydrates, not only did my crippling spinal arthritis disappear, but I dropped to my optimal weight too. I easily maintained my weight year-round, eating tons of the same foods that I used to be so scared of, like bananas and potatoes. Oh, if only my old self could see me right now, I'd be like, oh no, I'm gonna get diabetes! Oh, 18-year-old me. I was so naive and innocent. Anyway guys, I think that about wraps things up here. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you got any value out of this video, please consider adding value back to my channel by liking, commenting, and hitting that subscribe button below, as well as the bell icon next to it. That really helps my channel out. Alright, and with that, I'll see you guys soon, and God bless.